Hi everyone, welcome to the presentation of submission 8637 for Data for Policy Conference 2024. I will be presenting the extending abstract for the paper in progress. The title of the paper is Responsible AI Mechanisms in Public Sector Organizations, a Realist Synthesis Review. I would like to start with a quote that demonstrates a core challenge we face in AI governance and ethics. We all know that we need to explain an algorithm and we should be accountable, etc., etc. Those lofty concepts are familiar, but the question is yes, but how? This quote highlights a fundamental issue in AI governance. While the principles of transparency, accountability, and ethics are widely acknowledged, the practical implementation of these principles remains a significant challenge. As noted by various authors, many existing ethical guidelines are rigid, emphasizing strict rules and imperatives. This rigidity can limit their applicability and effectiveness in diverse contexts. For instance, Hagendorf also emphasizes that simple checklists and predefined principles often fall short when tackling the nuanced and intricate ethical dilemmas posed AI. Morley highlights a gap between what ethical frameworks aim to achieve and what is practically implementing. This gap is a critical challenge in AI governance, and the difficulty organizations face in translating high level ethical aspirations into day to day practices is one of the major research agenda for the field. Public sector, despite its significant impact and high stakes, is less frequently covered in AI governance research. However, this sector faces unique challenges and pressures in adopting responsible AI practices. This sets stage for our research, which aims to bridge the gap between high-level ethical aspirations and practical, actionable mechanisms for responsible AI implementation, especially in public sector. The research question, what are the responsible AI governance mechanisms in public sector organizations, is driven by the need to move beyond high level principles to identify practical, context specific solutions. For that, we are using realist synthesis approach, which aims to provide a comprehensive and empirically grounded understanding of effective AI governance mechanisms, ultimately bridging the gap between ethical aspirations and real-world implementations. Realist synthesis review is particularly suited for understanding complex interventions and their contexts. It focuses on identifying what works, for whom, in what circumstances, and why. And this is essential for AI governance and ethics, where context specific factors play a significant role. While systematic reviews are excellent for aggregating evidence and assessing effectiveness, they often lack the depth needed to explore the contextual nuances and mechanisms underlying AI governance. Thus, the early synthesis review is flexible and iterative, allowing for the inclusion of diverse types of evidence and adapting as new insights emerge. While the analysis of the papers is different, the starting point for the realist synthesis review is the same as for the systematic literature review. We start with identifying keywords. Our keywords has three dimensions. The first part is related to AI technologies, second to ethical and responsible AI, and the third to governance and public sectors. And they form the foundation of the research framework. By analyzing these aspects, we aim to provide comprehensive insights into the multifaceted challenges and opportunities in AI governance and ethics. For AI technologies, it includes general terms as well as specific technologies like machine learning, natural language processing, and algorithmic decision making. For the part of ethical and responsible AI, it uses keywords related to accountability, privacy, fairness, safety, transparency. While we know that it does not encompass all possible perspectives, we believe that principles, the criteria that we have presented here, are widely accepted and could serve as a good point for good starting point. These are the principles that are outlined in previously proposed literature and also the widely accepted report from European Commission on Trustworthy AI and also the papers that provide the overview of AI ethics guidelines. The third dimension focuses on the governance and the public sector's role on AI implementation, and for that includes the terms like AI governance, public administration, and public organizations. The keywords have been run and searched into the database of dimensions. We have chosen the dimension as a database because it offers extensive coverage across a wide range of academic disciplines. It not only also includes a journal articles but also books, chapters, conference proceedings, patents, policy documents, and this diversity was important for us to ensure that we capture a holistic view of AI governance and ethics. Also, Dimensions is very famous for its interdisciplinary approach, and this is also very important and essential part for the research that spans technology, ethics, and governance and public sector applications. This is a Prisma flowchart showing how we went from 1,300 papers to final selection of 30 paper, and specifically the following eligibility criteria had guided us in that process. We included studies specifically focusing on AI systems, much more specifically studies that explored development, design, or use of AI. And this criteria helped us to um, find the papers that would explore the process rather than just giving us the examples of different uses of AI systems. So next, we wanted to include the papers that had the major focus with responsible and ethical AI practices. However, the paper should have included the mechanism, process, or different approaches to how to achieve responsible or ethical AI, rather than only listing the principles. The next criteria we had was that the studies should be focused on public sector or government organizations so that we would keep the focus of our paper. And last but definitely not least, we wanted to include the papers with only empirical data. By empirical data, we mean the papers that have been using the primary data. By relying on empirical data, realist synthesis allows us to ground our findings in real world evidence. And this approach ensures that the governance mechanisms we identify are not only theoretically sound, but also practically applicable. For the exclusion part, what is different was that we have excluded the papers that had only technical aspects. But if it also had some other dimensions, then the paper was included. Now I want to move towards the preliminary results, which I want to emphasize that is primarily descriptive and providing an overview of the current landscape. But at the end of the presentation, I will also outline the next steps in our research in order to extract much more detailed information. The first graph shows the disruption of publications by research category, and it emphasizes the interdisciplinary connections, particularly between computing sciences, human society, and legal studies. And it makes once again the clear that AI governance is a multifaceted field requiring insights from multiple disciplines. The information and computing cluster, sciences cluster, is the biggest and most interconnected with many different fields, indicating its pivotal role in AI governance research. It also includes subfields like machine learning, cybersecurity, and privacy. Also, it's important to mention the significant representation of philosophy and legal studies, which was kind of expected as we had the focus on responsible and ethical side of AI. The next one provides the distribution of publications by year, and it once again proves, um, and I don't think that this one is specifically like surprising outcome, that there is a significant and sustained increase in publications on AI governance and ethics from 2015. So it kind of marks as a starting point, and there's a period when it starts slow and shows a gradual increase. However, we are currently now in the peak of this research. The next one is regarding the concept co-occurrence analysis, which indicates three big clusters. The red cluster is centered around the terms related to artificial intelligence, machine learning, public sector, information technology. So it kind of represents a group of concepts focused on the technical and implementation aspects of AI within public sector organizations. Another quite big cluster is blue one, which is much more focused on AI governance, ethics, regulation. So these kind of terms. And then the interesting one is the green cluster, actually, which includes the terms such as public services, human rights, social welfare, and we see that COVID-19 and pandemic also being quite strong one. And we can argue that it highlights the impact of AI on public services and social aspects, especially in the context of crisis and welfare. Also, we see that EU countries also like specifically showed there. It could emphasize that the regional focus on how AI is affecting public services and social policies. And yeah, we also have a yellow cluster, which normative framework could suggest a focus on theoretical frameworks used on AI governance and AI ethics. Cambridge Core, I would say, that is part of the analysis of dimensions because it was one of the data sources um, in the database. These numerous connections between these clusters once again proves the interdisciplinary interactions and dependencies. For instance, the governance of AI is connected to both to technical aspects and societal aspects. Next, I want to present the distribution of publications by location. And first, I want to emphasize that these slides are the result of analysis of the first set of papers, first 1,300 papers, and not for the finally selected papers. Unfortunately, I forgot to mention this for the previous these slides, but yeah. So what we can observe here on this map is that United States and Canada show the highest density of publications. Countries from Europe like United Kingdom, Germany, France, and Scandinavia also have quite high concentration of publication. Then, with moderate concentration, we have countries such as China, South Korea, and Japan. And we also see that from South America, Brazil shows a notable number of publications suggesting regional interest in these topics. Factor that should be mentioned is that the foreign language papers have been excluded, which could definitely be one of the reasons. Now I'm moving towards the abstract screening process, which has been done through the Ryan system. It ensures that multiple members of the teams would have access to that, and also it was much easier to keep the track of excluded papers and also filters the papers that, for instance, were interesting, such as not empirical but interesting here you'll see. Here I want to provide a quick statistics on the exclusion reason, and you can see that the most common reason for exclusion, with over 400 papers, is for not being empirical studies, which indicates that there might be a gap in empirical studies that provide real-world evidence and case studies on AI governance and ethical issues. The most common reason, the second most common reason is the paper was not really focusing on practical aspects of AI development, design, or use, which once again indicates that the major focus of papers are not still practical and actionable insights. Now we move to the analysis of the selected papers, and the first one is the statistics of the countries of the case studies in selected papers. So, to make it more clear, it's not the countries of the affiliated institutions or authors of the papers, but rather than countries that have been discussing these papers. We once again see that Europe dominates the list with multiple countries representing, and both United States and Canada are also well representing, indicating strong research and case study interest in governance and public sector applications. However, to compare this one to the geomap we had for the full set of papers, we can see that many countries have kind of disappeared. For instance, China, and one of the explanation of that could be the academic research traditions, such as that much more papers were focusing on theoretical aspects rather than empirical aspects from China. Next, we have the major keywords, a heat map, providing key terms and areas of interest in AI governance research in selected papers. What is interesting here to observe that it indicates a balanced focus on both the technical and ethical dimensions of AI, which is also a good sign for us. It also highlights several potential gaps, such as the need for more specific ethical issues studies, because we see the keywords of ethical and responsible, but not directly the keywords related to specific values and principles such as privacy, transparency, and explainability. And also, what is one of the interesting things to observe is like specific applications like policing and predictive analytics apparently have been the major part of the selected papers. We also decided to analyze the methodologies used in the papers, even though we knew that the papers we selected were empirical. We were wondering like what methods from empirical studies would be the most popular one, and semi-structured interviews are definitely the most commonly used methodology, either alone or in combination with other methods. This could indicate a preference for qualitative data collected directly from participants and providing in depth insight into AI governance issues. It could also indicate that most of the studies, if not all of them actually, are qualitative studies, so there is a gap of the mixed method approaches for a richer and more nuanced understanding of AI governance. One of the interesting things also to observe was whether the papers have been using theories to guide their research. And the analysis suggests that half of the studies did not use any theoretical framework. This could be explained by the field being quite young. Also, we observe that one of the most used theories are organizational theories, indicating that a substantial interest is in understanding AI governance through the dynamics of organizations, including their structure, behavior, and management practices, which is an interesting result for us, as we were quite interesting to explore like whether the papers were discussing these complex organizational dynamics. The relatively low use of AI specific frameworks suggests also the area for development. There is a potential to combine the organizational design and development and public sector frameworks to create more comprehensive models that address multiple facets of AI governance. That also could be an interesting thing for this particular research. As for realist synthesis, it aims to build or refine theoretical frameworks based on evidence. So this could be particularly valuable for advancing the theoretical foundations of AI governance and ethics through realist synthesis review. One thing interesting to observe was to see whose views were most considered in the papers, and that was relatively easy to do as the most frequent method was interviews in the papers, and we have collected data which professions we are interviewed the most, and you can see the technology and data specialists had we are the most interesting one for the researchers. However, we also see that project and product managers, leaders, and various public sector employees were also interviewed, which also could suggest an emerging trend towards interdisciplinary approaches in AI governance research, while combining technical, managerial, and theoretical perspectives and suggesting more holistic understanding of the complex issues. We also tried to identify key themes in the selected papers, even though it's a preliminary analysis. It could still point to primary concerns and focal points of current research landscape. We saw that many papers addresses the importance of managing the power imbalances and between the government and citizens and understanding the regulatory impacts of AI systems, which what could considered as something specific to public sector. Other recurring themes including promoting transparency and explainability, emphasizing the need for clear and understandable AI decisions. Also, effective stakeholder engagement and communication were considered essential to uphold fairness and accountability. It was highlighted in multiple studies. Also, developing organizational processes for responsible AI adoption and integration was identified as a key theme in multiple studies. While we just presented very preliminary themes identified, the next steps of the research involve delving deeper into the selected studies and trying to answer specific questions that are crucial for understanding AI governance mechanisms and finalizing realist synthesis review. It would include identifying the mechanisms that could help us understand the practical tools and strategies that are being proposed and implementing to assure responsible AI right now. Also, we are trying to explore and extract information about underlying principles that could allow us categorize and assess the alignment of these mechanisms with ethical standards. What we are also looking for in the papers is to identify the stakeholders, such as policymakers, practitioners, technologists, and identify, provide, who is advocating for different mechanisms and what are their perspective. And while context is critical in realist synthesis review, we try to identify different specific contexts in which mechanisms are effective or ineffective so that we can better assess their applicability and adaptability. One of the different context could be the different life cycle. For instance, there were some papers discussing that on a design stage, everything was upheld as a best practice to responsible AI standards. However, in the implementation process, there was a clear gap, and they have observed that police officers in that case were using the system in a different manner. Also, the context could be on organizational level, different stakeholders involved, and etc. And finally, we are also aiming to identify trade offs and dilemmas that could help us recognize the complexities and challenges involved in implementing responsible AI governance mechanisms. While on a design stage, one could not foresee all the trade offs and dilemmas that people, for instance, street level bureaucrats, are facing, exploring and extracting this information from papers that are directly exploring that stage of the AI systems could provide some insights on that. As a final outcome, there should be the framework which synthesize the context, mechanisms, and outcomes identified from different papers. And once again, the different contexts could be organizational settings, AI life cycle stages, mechanisms could be transparency tools, accountability measures that are employed to address AI governance challenges. There could be some organizational structures or maybe the positions that could help organizations ensure the ethical development and implementation of AI. And as for the outcomes, the effectiveness of these mechanisms varies based on the context that leads to different outcomes. For instance, reduced biases, enhanced trust. So we are in our way to explore what are intended and unintended outcomes explored in the papers. And by that, for this context mechanism outcome framework, should help us to understand not just what works in AI governance, but why it works, for whom, and under what circumstances. This approach could provide a comprehensive and nuanced understanding of the factors influencing responsible AI governance and building both theoretical advancement and practical implementations as well. Thank Thank you very much, and looking forward to meeting you at Data for Policy conference and also suggestions and questions you have